Hey, everybody, welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross, and I am so blessed and honored to be here today with Lee Gonzales, tax and compliance from Toyota Motor North America. We are going to be talking about tax. We are going to be talking about global mobility. We are going to be talking about the Jam Week, Joint Academe-Mobility Week here on Love and Reload. Very excited to hear his take on this and how we can partner better with the academic community. So we got a whole lot of topics coming in. We're going to give it just a moment as people are coming in right now. We see several people on Facebook coming in and YouTube. Keep on coming in. Hit that like button. Leave a comment. Let me know where you're coming to us from. We're going to be giving shout outs. You know how we do. Love to hear your questions for Lee as well. Love to hear your tax questions. Love to hear your joint Academe-Mobility questions. I want to hear, what are your questions about how we can be better mentors and stuff? Look at my dad's already getting in the mix. Thanks, Dad. You always need like the first person to leave a comment, Lee, and that's what dads are for, right, Lee?
That is right. Thanks, Dan.
There you go. Appreciate you, Dad. Hey, you know what? If this is the end of it right here, I think it's a success. My dad tuned in. Janet's looking forward to the show. Henri checking in from France, saying hello, Lee.
How's it going, Henry?
There we go, man. Checking out Henri. I'm still checking the mail for the Bordeaux, Henri. We got Katie Linehan coming. Happy Tuesday, Ben and Lee. Hey, as you're watching this, hit that like button, hit that applause button, send one out there to Lee. Lee, where in the world are you right now, man?
I am sitting in Frisco, Texas.
Nice. Frisco, the star. You a Cowboys fan, Lee?
I'm not a big football, but and I'm originally from DC, so so I have some Redskins in my background.
Oh my gosh!
I'm not a hardcore anything.
You're killing me, Lee. You're killing me. I'm a big Cowboys fan. Fans of the show know that. I got to go out to the Star in Frisco. I hear it's awesome. My mom lives in Plano. Is that where your office is? Where Toyota's new big world headquarters is?
That is correct. It's right on Plano, right at the edge of Frisco.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great facility. That's really cool. We got people checking in here. Tom, hello from sunny Denver. Lee and Ben. What's up, Tom? Victoria McCullough. Hi, Ben and Lee. I don't know if she meant those extra E's or not, but it's more exciting like that. All right, so let's hop right into it. Keep leaving those comments. Give yourself a shout out. We're going to keep checking in with you. Leave questions for Lee. But Lee, I want to really quick, before we get into the academia and everything that you're doing with the University of Texas at Dallas, I want to just understand a little bit about you. Like, what do you do? What do you do at Toyota?
So at Toyota, I kind of work with our tax tax provider, which is Deloitte, in managing some of the programs that we have. Some of the programs are, expats, so outbound from U.S. to another country, our inbounds that are coming to the U.S. from other countries, our business travelers that are going in and out all over the place, including domestic travel. So we could have folks from Texas to New York or Texas to Michigan. Sometimes there's tax implications during that movement based on what they're doing, based on timing, and all that. So in a nutshell, that is, everything that I do in the payroll department with specifically the taxes around all the movement.
Before I ask you my burning tax questions, okay, first, how did you get into global mobility?
So just a little quick background story. I went to the military after high school. So, I went to the U.S. Marine Corps. I became a Marine. I was a Marine for a long time. Wow. And I worked as a personnel administrator. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, there was a transition. Okay, what do I do now with the skill set that I have? I got into payroll, no degree, no anything. So I started working in payroll, worked my way up. And then I got to a point where I said, if I ever want to be into management, I have to go back to school, get a degree. Okay. When I looked at what payroll managers have, all of them had, they had various degrees, but mainly accounting degrees. So I didn't have a burning passion for accounting, but I figured this is what's going to help me continue in my career. I'm going to have an accounting degree. Well, I started going to UTD for an accounting degree. So I'm an
Nice.
alumni at UTD. And it was through mentorship that I learned, people started asking me, what do you want to do? Are you going to pursue a master's degree? Are you going to pursue your CPA? These are things that I had never considered. So when I'm being asked, I said, I don't know. I didn't think about getting a master's. Why not? It's only a year more. And so
Right.
people were mentoring me, asking me a lot of questions, and it got me thinking that there's a lot more broad opportunities than being a payroll manager, right?
Yeah.
And so as I started, exploring that, I started networking a lot, and I met a senior manager at Deloitte, and he was asking me, I was kind of looking at the tax area just because it made more sense with my payroll background to get into tax as opposed to audit or any other field in the accounting world. Well, this manager said, have you ever thought of global mobility tax? I said, I've heard of an expat, but I really don't know everything that you guys do. So he started explaining everything that Deloitte does, and it sounded like it was a perfect match for me based on my payroll background that I had done for years. Now with my academics being in accounting, it was like a perfect match. But again, to the point of, I think you mentioned it yesterday, nobody says, hey, I'm going to go to school to become a global mobility something, whether it
Right.
be HR, whether it be, relocation expert, whether it be tax. People say I want to do tax, but they don't, and I when I mentor students and I hear I want to go into tax, then I say, okay, what tax? You want to do global mobility tax, international tax,
Right.
uh,
What do they say when you say what tax? Like,
corporate tax, right? And I started asking them a lot of questions, and some very small number of students, they know, they're like, oh, I want to do international because I want to do transfer and tax, and they've done their research, right? And I'm like, all right, you're like ahead of the ball game. Other
Mhm.
people are like, I don't know, I just thought I wanted to do tax, but I didn't know there was all these like different buckets, right?
Right.
And when you go to a big company like Deloitte, you're going to specialize, right? So that's another thing where I tell them, even when I was at Deloitte, I said, if you want to learn a little bit about everything, perhaps Deloitte is not the place to be, and kind of go work for a smaller accounting firm where you're going to be exposed to different areas, right? Because at
Because
a
at a
big
big
company,
firm,
you're going to
they
be an
only
expert, right?
specialize. The
You're
expert.
gonna
Okay.
you're gonna go into a niche, right? And so that's what I did when I went to Deloitte. It was global mobility tax, and that was kind of my world there. Everything that has to do with the what we call the assignment life cycle, right? From compensation and analytics to picking assignments, to helping them with cost analysis, to actually help them with all the RMCs and all the relocation vendors that we have, movement, language training. Deloitte helped a lot with that. We kind of had like a la carte menu, right? That people get to choose, what services do you need help, depending on the teams that those clients had. Some people have big global mobility teams. They took a lot of the work, and they just needed help in special areas. Some say, we have no idea what we're doing. We check all the boxes, right? We need
Right.
all the services. And so, but that is how, I kind of tracked and I am where I am, not because I chose to early on. It just kind of led on there. So one of the important things that I always like to say is mentoring, networking and finding a mentor, finding out what people do, because that's how you're going to find what you want to do in life, right?
I,
By hearing other people.
Yeah, I love that story about mentorship because it's like so apropos, right? It's like exactly what we're talking about. And we're going to get to the way that you've been mentoring kids at UTD and bringing it full circle. But have you ever stopped and like reflected back on, how your life would have been different if that person hadn't mentored you and said, hey, wait, Lee, like you really need to think about this more. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? Like, how important was that, you think, to how, like, to where you ended up and where your career is now?
So I think that's very important, because I think had I not came across that one particular person, then I would have probably chose something else completely different, and that would have been fine. I think I would have been okay, but I would have lost all those years of experience that I had accumulated in payroll and not use it going forward. right? So I
Yeah.
could have gotten into auditing, for instance, and maybe something related to payroll would come back. Oh, Lee had some background in that, and that might be useful, but I wouldn't have found this niche that that utilizes that experience that I had been accumulating over the years and now put it to good use, right? Because being in tax with a payroll background and global mobility, it's a lot better than someone coming right off of college with just an accounting degree and not having been exposed to all the payroll functions.
You're so right. And I love this. And I love where you're going with this. My mind's going in a million directions and all the comments are coming in. So keep leaving those comments. Hit that like button. I want to hear your questions for Lee. I want to hear your feedback on this. Lee, I want to hear about, the skills that you think are needed from these kids coming out of college and international business and tax and everything, and how it actually applies in the real world, right? In the seat that you sit in every day. And I also want to hear about your experiences mentoring these young people too, because I think we all love to hear these stories. And we're actually going to get to meet some young people on Friday who are going through this program. So I want to hear about all that. We're going to hear about all that. So keep those likes coming, hit those comments as well. We've got a few people checking in right now. And this is great. Henri says, I say I want wine. He's like, well, go buy some. Here's the link. He's taking orders and shipping wine. I don't know if he's paying tax on that. Lee, don't fact check him on that if he's paying the VAT. Stephen Meyer, Hampton Roads driver. We got a household goods driver out there. Appreciate you, Stephen, for your service. Appreciate your service too, Lee, for our country. Thank you so much. Hoorah. Victoria McCullard, funny story. When Toyota moved into their headquarters, I was on site at Frito-Lay across the street. They put up a huge sign in their windows, "Send chips." We got such a kick out of it. Oh, Victoria, that's fantastic. Victoria, maybe you can network with Lee. Do you know Victoria Lee? Have you met?
I do not.
Oh my gosh, you guys have to network together because I think she may be looking for her next chapter, and she's an awesome global mobility professional. Tracy Denora, good afternoon. What's up, Tracy in Jersey? Jersey girl in the house. Fernando from Brazil. Appreciate you, Fernando. Gabby Bakhuber, I love your experience going from mentorship to a global mobility career. Also, corporate tax is fascinating. Excited for this discussion. Okay. Gabby, you open this Pandora's box of corporate tax. We're going to riff on this just because Gabby's one of my favorite viewers, okay? Gabby's fascinated by corporate tax. I'll be honest. I'm a little bit, I don't know if I'm supposed to it's a little over my head sometimes. But I do know one thing. I know that the business traveler gives y'all headaches. So what do people need to know right now? What kind of tax challenges are you solving on a day-to-day basis? What do people need to know if they're global mobility professionals watching this about corporate tax as it pertains to global mobility?
So with business travelers, the hardest part is keeping track where folks are going, right? For instance, I'll give an example for Toyota. One of our challenges is people going into Canada. A lot of the ways that we track our team members traveling are through expense reports, right? So it's easy when someone from Texas goes to Canada because they're going to have to book a flight, they're going to have to book a hotel. So they leave tracks where I can track them and say, okay, you spent X amount of days in Canada. I can then say how many of those were working days. What did you do? It's easy to find that information.
You don't want Lee to call. Lee's going to be like, yo, I'm seeing right here. It looks like you went to Canada. How long were you there? You're like the customs guy at the border. Like, what's your intent?
Right.
How long are you staying? Yeah. Okay. But if I'm in Detroit and I just
what makes it hard
bridge,
is we have offices up in Michigan, and we have R&D research and all that going on in Michigan. Well, those folks, they can just drive anytime they need to into a plant. They may not even stop for gas. They might get gas on the way back, right? I have no idea that they were in Canada, right? And self-reporting, you know how that works, right? People are busy. They're not going to, a lot of times they're not going to self-report. We have implemented something that's easier now to try to identify who's going ahead of time. But those are the challenges that, then we get to executives, right? So, executives sometimes travel outside of our traveling arrangement, so they fall from my reports, and I don't know that they spent time there. Especially with some of your high earners, right? Their taxability, they could be there just one day, and they're going to become taxable based on amount threshold, just because of the amount of income that they're generating. It may just be one day for them, but there may be some tax implications for high level executive that goes to Canada for one day.
Okay, my last follow-up question on this is, if I'm a high-level executive who goes to Canada for one day, okay, sounds like my life. What is work? Like if I'm like just banging out emails on my phone there, is that work? Or if I decide to go live and take this exact interview right now with Lee Gonzales up in Windsor across the bridge, is that work?
So there's a lot of specific items that's going to fall into what is work, and what we've seen is that compliance enforcement has increased over the last years, right? So Canada is scrutinizing everything that people are doing more closely, and not only Canada, but we are too for everyone that's coming in. Even states are scrutinizing what is everyone doing. So we got to make sure to look at all the activities that they're doing, and that's one of the things that we do on the form that we implemented anytime someone's going out, is they tell us the activities so that we can review them and say, do they meet this threshold of work activities, right? If they're going just for a meeting for a few hours, they might not be, or some certain training or whatnot might not be designated as a work day.
All right. So another question, and everybody right now watching this, hit that like button because Lee's going to keep us out of jail. Okay. So hit that like button. Okay. But no, I have a specific for you, right? So International Association of Movers just announced that their conference in like 2023 or something is going to be in Toronto. Okay. Totally geeked out about this. But when I go to Toronto for 5 days and I'm at the IAM conference, is that work for tax purposes? No. Sweet. So my boss was right. It's not work. Okay. All right. Cool. Interesting. That's funny. Okay. We got all these questions coming in. We got comments. Leave the questions. We're going to get into I promise we're going to get into the academic angle. We're going to hear about the mentorship and everything. I want to hear about the kids. Charles Beatty's checking in from Louisville, Texas, right down the street. Awesome. Lynn Greenberg checking in from New York. Pivot App. What's up, Lynn? Haven't seen you in a while. All right. So Lee, you went to UTD, right? That's awesome. Now you're at Toyota, right there in the DF Dub. Somebody had a conversation with you when you were going through your journey as a young person that led you to where you are. What made you decide to kind of give back and to kind of like get back involved in this mentoring program? And maybe we should take a step back for the people that didn't watch Hubert yesterday. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what this program is? Tell us about the joint Academe-Mobility program at UTD, if you don't mind.
So this program that Hubert is, leading at UTD, it gives him, he has curriculum on, kind of global human resources program, and it exposes students to a lot of opportunities out there. But he doesn't only want to tell them about it; he wants to connect them with the community that generates these types of jobs, right? So that one, they understand what we do, what opportunities are out there, bring a mix of people. Because a lot of times, from if you think from a Deloitte perspective, and that's one of the things when I was at Deloitte that I kind of voiced, where we were bringing in accounting majors for a lot of these positions, right? And sometimes you don't need to be an accounting major if you're going to do global compensation, for instance. Right. You can have an accounting degree, but not necessarily. You can be kind of like a global HR. So that is kind of like where I got the conversation. It says we got to broaden when we're doing our search, we got to broaden and not only look for accounting students at particular schools, right? So the way that I was interested in helping Deloitte bring a broad set of people was that the way I came to Deloitte was through an alpha convention. So for a lot of people that don't know what alpha is ALPFA, and that was it used to stand for Association of Latino Professionals for Finance and Accounting. and then they changed the name to For America because they brought in from accounting, finance and accounting for America, just because now it includes other industries, not just finance and accounting. It is still heavy on finance and accounting. So you're going to find all the accounting firms, all the banks, they're part of this organization. And what
Sure.
they're doing is specifically looking for Latino talent to bring to companies so that they can increase their diversity in these areas. And so that is the way that I met Alex from Deloitte, and he, was the one who talked to me about global mobility and whatnot. So he was a big part of getting me started on this career path, but other people also kind of getting me out of my thought of I want to be a payroll manager, right? So all these people were very key as to my success academically, and then thinking ahead, planning where I wanted, kind of planning for my career and not just leaving it to chance, right? So I think that how I started giving back was once I started seeing how, Deloitte recruited, and I started getting involved in helping because of the impact that people had on me. I kind of, I had a drive to give back the same way, right?
Let me
And
ask you about. I want to stop you there and really quick to dig into that for just a moment there, okay? Because we've talked a lot about DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion on this show, right? And we've talked about how to go from beyond lip service to practical solutions, and how do we actually get involved? What are real, tangible things that we can do to improve the diversity, equity, and inclusiveness of our organizations? And what I love about what you just said is you said, okay, I recognize the need here. I was a person that made it into to this organization, but now you became, it seems like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you became like a change agent within your company to take some leadership in that area. What made you do that, and how did you, like, give us some tips on that, if you don't mind?
so, with Deloitte being they had their procedures as to how they go about recruiting, how they go about diversity recruiting on these certain events that they do. For example, Alpha is one, NAVA for the National Association of Black Accountants is another group that and then there's Ascend for the Asian Pacific group that they recruit heavily at these conferences. But what I started seeing, because they brought me in to help with the recruiting, kind of help represent the company. So I was on the other side of my experience going through as a student. But one of the weaknesses that I saw is that they have certain criteria, expectations, especially firms like Deloitte that are very competitive firms. They have this certain criteria, but they weren't, at least in my view, or at least in my area, not putting enough efforts to help the students before they come. Because a lot of times you have a lot of students with potential, but they haven't been polished, and they haven't been taught all these things that the company is looking for. What kind of skills? So I think I try to get them as early as I can, right? If you can get freshmen and sophomores in college and start telling them all the important things. One of the first things you said a few minutes back was, what are some of the skills that people or these companies look
Yeah,
at?
let's talk about
And
that.
one of the things that I tell students is, regardless of the industry that you're going to, people skills are like number one. So your soft skills, you can teach a monkey how to use a calculator, right? I'm just exaggerating, but I can teach you some of the repetitive tasks of the job. I can't teach you people skills, right? Those you kind of have to learn through experience on
Is
your own.
is that a skill? I mean, let's use people skills, because you mentioned that. Is that a skill that is lacking for kids? I mean, and especially.
For a long time, yes, and it's still lacking in some industries, right? So when we look at I think Hubert yesterday mentioned about having these programs now where people have to do cases and presentations and that, and I think that was directly the university taking feedback from the business worlds that they partner with, because they're producing a lot of highly academic students, but then when they go, they don't have public speaking skills, they don't have, right? So they were lacking a few years ago, and UTD actually has in my view, turned this around. Even when I was starting to go there, making people work in groups more, because when you get to the real world, you're going to work in groups. There's going to be a lot of presentations, and there's a misconception of, especially people studying accounting, like, well, I thought accountants were introvert. I don't have to talk to anyone. I'm just going to be crunching numbers. Well, no. When you go to a firm like Deloitte, you're going to be part salesman, right? You have to have that extrovertness in you to talk to clients, to figure out what problems they have, so that before you offer solutions, you need to understand problems. And to understand the problems, you need to understand people. Sometimes they don't even know what the priority problems are, right? And you have to be a people person in order to understand and communicate with people to draw out those problems. Then you can find solutions.
I love that. I love that you're saying that. I think that applies for tax. That's a common misconception for tax professionals. I think it's a common area of opportunity for our HR practitioners also who are watching. I mean, I hear the same complaint voiced differently when people say, I don't have a seat at the table, and they're looking for relevance in their organization, and they're looking for people to buy into their ideas, and they're looking to move to the strategic level of the organization and out of the tactical, practical day-to-day kind of level, and they're looking to ascend. And so I think it's fascinating that you've identified this as an opportunity, and it sounds like you address this in the mentorship with the young people that you talk to. I want to, first of all, if you're watching this right now, hit that like button, throw comments in there, questions. I'd love to hear what you have. It looks like people are coming in with some questions right now. I want to hear more about these skills that you've identified and that you're actively trying to imbue these students with. But before we get there, let's take a couple of comments here. I see a question coming in, so let's keep that going here. Olivia, shout out, fascinating discussion. What's up, Olivia? Jamie, hi, Ben and Lee, cheers from chilly Mississippi. Finally, the weather changed in Mississippi. The cool thing, Lee, if you don't know, you can tune in to Love and Reload every day at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central, and find out what the weather is in Mississippi. Little known fact, actually. Rob Zeitz, greetings from Massachusetts. That's cool. There's no tax issue there. No, not at all. Tim Quirk, hi, all Western New York. A little tardy today. Hope all are well. It's all right. I know you had to walk to the program, Tim. Rob Zeitz checking in from Eastern Mass. Doesn't even know which side of the state line he's on. Totally cool. Heather Jameson, hello from Detroit. What's up, Heather? We've got a question from Tom, or a comment. Lee is spot on. People and relationship building skills are something that students can evolve into. Emotional intelligence and business maturity are two things that will come with age, and my experience is that very few professionals have the capacity to display either until they're out of their 20s. What are your thoughts on that, Lee?
Well, I think there's truth to that, right? Nothing comes like experience and building on the years. But I think that one of the things that you can start developing those skills early on if students know where they need to develop. Because I think once they start hearing this is important, they have to make an effort to get out there, start networking. And a lot of, some students are starting to become good at it, I believe, right? Kind of networking, asking the right questions, but understanding really what networking is. It's not just showing up to an event, talking only to your group of friends from the school, eating the appetizers, drinking a couple of glasses of wine and going back home. What did you accomplish? You didn't accomplish anything.
Sounds like a great night to me, Lee. I don't know. Man. What more do you need?
You got free appetizers and free wine, right? And that may be a score for some, but if you really want other, been, because I've heard it a lot. I've been networking for a while and I still haven't found anything. Nobody has helped me. And I said, well, have you done your research? Have you target people? Have you, once you do your research as to what is this event that I'm going to, who's going to be there, and who do I want to meet, right? Because you have to be strategic as to, having a list of 5 people that I'm going to meet these 5 people, and I'm going to try to not only meet them, but set something after the fact. Stay in touch with them, have coffee with them, right? And a lot of people are willing to do that with you. And just like any other relationship, some people are not going to have any interest, and that's okay. You let go and you don't feel bad about it. Say, okay, I knocked on that door, it wasn't open, I'm going to knock on the next door, right? Because that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I want to hear now. So I want to pivot into the specific program that's going on at UTD, and I want to hear specifics, and I want people to hear this right about this program. So what Hubert described to me, and help me fill in the blanks as someone who's more involved than I am, but what Hubert described to me is there's 40 something kids in this class, and they've been broken into, I want to say, 7 teams. Is that right?
Correct.
Right? And each team is assigned to a mentor coach. Is that right?
Correct.
And then they tackle a project together. What is your role, Lee, in that process?
So I'm a mentor to a team, and we're tackling one, kind of the tax compliance issue, but also the personal need that team members have or employees have in this, especially in this COVID environment, right? Some of how our companies, supporting their teams remotely, right? How are they getting some of the emotional support? Not only resources for work, but sometimes some people need that emotional support or making sure that they feel connected. You have to stay connected to your teams and not just kind of fall off the grid and kind of do your work and not know what things are going. And one of the things that I can say is specifically about Toyota is that they have put forward a lot of support so that we can, be successful working remotely, right? And I even told my leaders is that I feel like I talk to them more now. And I literally sat next to my manager at work, right? We were back to back. We were on cubes, kind of my back was to her back. And while we would talk and, have the greetings and whatnot, we got into our work. And I feel like now we actually have more conversations where we're further away than when we were sitting next to each other. Right now, if I had a question or something, I can holler and say, hey, did you get that email? Are you responding? That sort of thing. But I think that now, because they've made an effort to talk not just about work and, but talk about, how are things holding up and how are you doing grocery shopping? How are you, how are the kids doing? And are they starting school virtual? Like, we're having more personal conversations and making stronger connections, I believe.
So you're almost like COVID is almost like made you look at your relationship through fresh eyes, almost, right? Like you're talking about like a real topic, like how are you dealing with work, homeschooling or whatever, right? And whereas before it's how you doing? Good. How you doing? Good. Okay, back to work. That makes a lot of sense. That's really interesting. We got people checking in here. Letitia checking in. Hi, Lee. That's awesome. We got Tim Quirk says, thank you, Lee, for being a mentor to your team. Thank you for giving of yourself. Brian from First Tech Federal Credit Union checking in. So I want to talk about the idea of, I want to finish understanding about your team first before we talk about the mentorships and the things that we're learning here. So you have a team, and how often do you meet with them? What is your cadence like? What type of work are they actually doing? What happens after they're done? Walk me through that process.
So our team, we meet once a week.
Okay.
And they kind of work, they're doing research, they're putting together a draft of a paper they're going to turn in. And so through their research, they come up with questions specifically around Toyota. How is Toyota handling this? What kind of support has Toyota given? What kind of activities have Toyota done to make sure people stay connected? What kind of support do they do for, health-wise, are there any resources for people that need to talk to someone about sadness, depression, or, what is Toyota doing to that? So they had a lot of good questions, right? What is Toyota doing for this, that, and they're coming with those questions.
Now, is their job to gather that information, or then they going to turn around and make recommendations or bring ideas to the table?
They're gonna use, what they collect and then bring an idea to the table as well.
So what does the product look like? What does the finished product of this look like ideally?
So ideally, they're going to put it, at least for our topic, they're going to come up with groups of or strategic planning that companies should do, and specifically around the support and what things they should be doing to keep people connected, basically.
And I heard that there are going to be 3 teams chosen as the winning teams out of these 7. And I hear that those kids are going to get cash prizes. Is
Yes,
that a motivator for those kids or what?
is going to be a motivator. So for sure.
So I got to ask you as their coach, right? I mean, you're the Bill Belichick of this team here, okay? What's your winning strategy to put some cash in these kids' pockets? I mean, what's going to take home the gold this year, Lee?
So I think it's also, not only giving them information about Toyota specifically, but, just general information as well, as to understanding also the environment that we were in prior to COVID and how, I think we were already heading where technology does, is a big part of everything we do, but how does technology play a role? And now that we were kind of pushed and it aggregated, that push towards more technology and more remote, and but I think we were already heading there. It was just, it was slowly, because a lot of people were, kind of like, I don't know if I want to have my teams working remotely or
Yeah,
not that. But understanding the environment, understanding how quickly and flexible, companies have to be to adjust, because we see it all the time in different industries, right? If, when Blockbuster doesn't adjust to the changing environment, then you're not going to survive for a long time, right? So understanding that companies have to adjust in order to survive. If you don't adjust, then you're not going to survive. And then kind of digging deep into those details. But I think that brings a lot of interest to students, when you start talking about, not, the impact of these strategies that they're coming up with, right? And being flexible and adjusting, and that goes from an individual perspective as well, right? Like I mentioned, in my role, I'm doing something a little different, something that took me out of my comfort zone right now, and now I'm working on some geo integrations for a new system that we're doing, right?
GL being General
Ledger, right?
Integrations.
So hey, he's the one with the accounting in the payroll department, so you understand general ledger, so now you're going to do this project, right?
Yeah, no, I love this. I love this, and I want to ask you, if you're watching this right now, go ahead, hit that like button, leave a comment. I want to also ask you a question right now. I'm going to ask the audience a question right now as we get into kind of the last portion of this. Is how would you like to see academia support global mobility? Right? Give us an idea, one idea that you'd like to see colleges and universities in the international business program. What would you like to see them do to prepare kids coming out to be contributors in our industry? Or what would be one way that you would like to see global mobility partner with the academic? Ree, Victoria, Katie, this is for all y'all. Gabby, I know Gabby's always got great ideas. Fernando, Lynn, Jamie, Heather, Tom, I'd love to hear your ideas. Brian, Tim, throw your ideas there in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say so we can riff off of those ideas. But I'm going to ask you, Lee, as a person who sat on the corporate side. Look at Letitia saying all these nice things about you. I go, this is the best part of the show, when you get to read like the nice comments, right? Lee is a genuine enthusiast of mentoring. He has mentored many other UTD students even before he got this project. What's up in that? I think I want to go to this question. I want to ask you this question, Lee. As a person who sits in the corporate side, who does mobility from a corporate standpoint, who's been in it for a while and seen a lot of things, what are some of the areas that I'm going to ask this question to you? What are some of the areas that you would like to see? Well, what kinds of skill sets would your corporation like to see coming from this course? So I'm going to ask you the same question we've asked the people. What would you like to see as a corporate person?
So I think that from a skill set, I always say your soft skills are important, right? So your communication skills, and there's your technical skills are important, but if I had to weigh them, I would say it's a 70-30, right? 70% I'm going to put on your soft skills, communications, people, empathy, all these other soft skills that you can have, public speaking, all of that, I think is very important because, especially with Toyota, a lot of times we say we hire you not for this position, but we hire you for future positions, right? So we want to make sure that you have a skill set that is flexible, and you can end up doing something completely different than what I hired you for, but you have the foundation of these skills, these soft skills. The technical comes with experience, and I can have someone with knowledge show you those, and you're going to learn over the years, right? So that's why I put a lot of emphasis on the soft skills, because those are harder to teach, and you have to start, putting yourself out there, making yourself uncomfortable so that you can develop these skills. But from a strategic standpoint, coming from Deloitte and now at Toyota and other companies that I work for, but mainly Deloitte and Toyota, where was part, I have been part of the recruiting process. There are very, very good processes in place when we are hiring accounting students, are very specific, right? Because there's a cycle already that's developed. Programs, who we partner with universities so that we can, target certain, the best of the accounting students in particular schools. But there isn't something similar for HR roles or global mobility or other, they still recruit, they still create things, but it's not as an efficient and good process as we have. And for instance, in my experience, it's only been recruiting for accounting students, right? So Deloitte had a perfect, machinery to get the best talent out there. But I think we fell short with global mobility.
Well, let's
For instance,
reimagine that process right now, because Tom comes in, right, and his answer is career fairs. Let's reimagine what a global mobility career fair or entry level talent sourcing process might look like as a partnership with universities. How might that look different?
so I think that, for instance, when I talked about diversity and inclusion, companies have a lot of events, or organizations put in certain career fairs or conferences every year, or regional conferences where there's an opportunity for companies to sponsor and come in and do a career fair, because most of these events have career fairs. But again, the focus on a lot of the companies is accounting, for instance, right? Or if it's engineering, they're going to put a lot of focus on what the main industry, or their main industry, right? But I think that you can further create, by partnering not only with accounting groups, because I think, from a global mobility standpoint, you also need accountants that are, have a tax background or whatnot, but you can bring in accountants, and you can also, with payroll. For instance, the APA has a lot of programs, the American Payroll Association. One of their, I became involved with them as well locally in Dallas, but one of the challenges is bringing younger people, right? So if you look at the American Payroll Association and who the members are, there's not a lot of young faces in the crowd. And that's one
Why
of
is that? Why is that, you think, Lee?
it has been a lot of the challenges in presenting. Is one of those things where students are not saying, oh, I'm going to be a payroll professional when I graduate school, because they see payroll as a niche, as something that they may not want to do, but they don't know how tax is attached to payroll. They don't know how global mobility is attached to payroll. They don't know how benefits and compensation is attached to payroll, right? So payroll, while on itself may not be something lucrative that students are looking to do, I think that by combining, bringing payroll, bringing HR, bringing accounting groups, and having more of a diverse career fair, as to Tom's point, that is what's going to do. And sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
I love this idea, and I just have one thought, and I know this isn't about me, it's about you, but sometimes it's always about me, right? So he says career fairs, right? And I just had this this thought, right? If we're all trying to recruit these students with this international business background, or this international, this global HR background, or in your case, accounting, but with a corporate and international twist to it, and there's only maybe a few needles in the haystack at each university that fit that, right? Who actually are looking for that. But when you put all the needles in the haystacks all together, right, and you have a big pile of needles, which doesn't sound that much fun, but just bear with me. You have a big pile of needles. I mean, what if we did a global mobility career fair that reached out to all the global business schools, all the international business schools, and said, hey, here's what we're about. Here's the profile of the individual we're talking about, not only for this job, but for the next job, to your point, right? And let's bring them all together in a virtual environment, right? Where we can say, hey, I'm big RMC over here, I'm RMC over here, or I'm DSP over here, or I'm logistics and moving company over here, but we're all kind of looking for people with those same types of interests. Let's put them all together. I just think that's one of these, like, the power of the virtual environment now that we have. Instead of saying, hey, I'm going to show up to the university and I'm going to put out my tablecloth and I'm going to bring my pens and I'm going to try to convince people that, my job is really exciting when I go home and I don't even like it sometimes, kind of thing, right? Like, I mean, this is at the old career fair model. It's like, how could we do a better job of that? And this is so interesting.
So I think what I think I heard it from your interview with Hubert. It was, there's a thought right now of having a student organization, and I think that would be the way to move forward with this program, because then the students can drive the need. And then not only are we going to have a career fair, but through the student organization, just like the accounting groups or even alpha at different campuses, right? Because to your example, finding those few needles in those haystacks, when we're looking for Latino talent that's in accounting with specific CPA tracks, you're not going to find many at each school. Right. But if you get the best of the best little by little, but you unite all these talent in one location from all the regional schools, because I'll tell you, through Alpha, we had regional conferences. We had people coming from Louisiana, from Houston, as far as from El Paso. So when students, they want to pursue and get opportunities, they're going to come. So I think the key would be to start that student organization, because now that student can work on a local base level with corporate partners out there that can come in and do presentations to the students, that can come in and talk about the skill set that they need. They can come in and see, this is what we're looking for. And that's what we did a lot of times with the way I've been involved with recruiting. Is you spend a whole year with these students for a annual type event, right? Whether it's a conference or whether it's a quarterly career fair or something like that. But you spend time with these students that by the time these career fairs come around, if you've been involved from a corporate partner perspective, you get to know a lot of students. So the recruiting becomes easier. And that's what I try to tell my colleagues is, looking at people on paper and not being successful as to who they hire because they look good on paper, by working together with these students,
Yes.
you're going to know who has the drive and what kind of students, right? Even if their GPA wasn't as high as you usually look for, and these situations, that they have some family situations that make it harder. They have to work, they have to do all this stuff, and these students are go-getters. They're going to be successful when you bring them in. So you're building these relationships, and not just like a career fair, right? And you're getting to know.
I just want to share one experience I had like this with Wayne State University. I was a part of a computer science program. I was part of their final project. They did an app for me, whatever. I met with these kids every week. To your point, you bring them in a group. You know who the A players are real quick. You know who the B players are. You know who's always missing the group meeting or who's running late. You know who's, doing 80% of the work, who's doing 20% of the work. I mean, this is the best environment to gauge these people. And then at the end, you're always like, hey, if you ever need a job, let me know. Or you ever need a recommendation, let me know, 100%. This is fantastic. We got so many comments coming in here, and I want to make sure we get to all of them. This is great. You got my mind going here. All right, let's see what Gabby says. Gabby says key skills she's looking for: crisis management. Oh gosh, I mean, hey, it's just HR here. Crisis management, fast-paced thinking, but also a steady analytical approach, knowing what is tactical versus strategic and where they can overlap. Wow, great question. Does one of those things jump out at you, Lee?
Yeah, so analytics is, it's you have to be an analytical person, right? And I would put those into the soft skills, right? You don't need to be a certain industry to be an analytic person, but you have to have attention to detail analytic in everything that you do. Analyze things, be strategic, be purposeful at everything that you do. And I think that I would put in those skills into the soft skill that I talk about.
Nice. Let's see what Brian says. Brian says relocate them with an internship or study abroad program, up close and personal. This way they get the actual experience, which makes them more relevant. What do you think about that, Lee?
When I think as to what goes into relocations, I don't know if that would be feasible for a lot of companies to go through that with the students, but definitely, offering internships and even internships maybe in other states or anything like that. I think for the companies that are in multiple states and things like that, I think that it would give them a little bit of taste as to what it entails to have somebody move and move through an assignment like
You
that.
know, I hear you on the cost and the logistics of it for sure. I think the study abroad thing though is a melding of a perfect collegiate experience that already exists, and then you get the immersion of being overseas in a program like that. You feel relo from jump. You also understand the cultural issues. I mean, talk about soft skills, right? So much of a success or a failure has to do with cultural language, interpersonal. Did I immerse myself? Do I want to be there? I just, I love it. I absolutely love it. See, when we source it to the crowd, they come back with some great stuff. Victoria says, an understanding that global mobility is not black or white, being able to understand the nuances that go into working with a client, RMC, employee, or supplier, being able to work through a situation by providing recommendations that will work for all. Is that like an exercise you could do, like a triage exercise, like a here's all the problems coming in, here's how we come up with a solution that fits everything? I mean, is that like something you can teach or train to, or?
So I think that companies that kind of see a little bit of everything, because if I was to have someone intern in my group, they're going to be very focused on a particular area. But I think that when you can expose to different experiences, if you can expose students to different experiences, they're going to learn a lot more, right? So again, I can only go for what my experience is, but like for instance at Deloitte, they help and work with all the vendors, whether it be scheduling language training, whether it's giving a tax presentation, or giving a cultural language or cross-cultural training or language training, setting all those up, relocating, finding an apartment, finding cost of living, doing a cost of living analysis, all these things that go into the assignee life cycle, including repatriating, right? What is to look back when you get back to the US or the country of origin, right? How are you going to fit in? How are you going to bring these new skill set and make sure that it is useful and not, this is something you did this thing in Europe, you come back and you go back to your old job. That's, the company loses out, you lose out, everybody loses out, right? So being able to see the whole picture, and sometimes, I think that not many companies can provide those experiences, but from a student's perspective, if you can get into a big accounting firm that has kind of view of all these things, scoring an internship there is, I think, will do good for a lot of students. And there's obviously other companies that maybe, like if I was to have someone that come to Toyota, not only would I have them work with me part of their internship, but I would have them work with more of the HR folks that kind of deal more with the other vendors of relocating and what that costs, right? Because that's not what I currently do, but I would like them to expose. So try to expose them in many different areas as much as you can, so that not only do they learn what we do and have a better picture, but I think this is the type of activities that help people decide this is what I want to go into. Because when you're a college student, you don't know exactly what you want
I
to.
love that, because if you got an accounting intern, they would sit with you the whole time and they would just be a tax intern, right? They would just sit with you. But if you got a global mobility intern, you can put them on a rotation throughout the organization and say, okay, I
Exactly.
want you to sit with Susie, I want you to sit with John, I want you to sit with Terry, whatever. And they could see how the whole ecosystem works together, which again, going back to your global mobility club, right? And having universities partner in this club, so you could do virtual events, but then also local tie-ins with companies. Oh man, this is so interesting. Okay, I know we got a lot to cram in here. I only got like 5 more minutes, so I'm going to do it. Rob says the things he's looking for from colleges. Firstly, soft skills. I graduated with very inconsistent experiences in those areas and needed to play catch up. Secondly, teach basics of how economics work around the world and how much countries can differ from each other, exchange rates, labor laws, taxes. I mean, things like currency, those things. I mean, you take them for granted. Taxes, you take them for granted how difficult those things can be. So I totally, and that is, I think, something that you could teach from, I'd say out of a textbook, but I mean, it's something, some of these things are more finite and discrete. Rob says from a mobility standpoint, and this is kind of the second piece of my question, is how can we as an industry get more involved? And I want to ask you, Lee, as well. Rob says, for mobility, when we have in-person conferences and conventions, maybe organizers could reach out to local schools to see if students want to attend the events or sessions to get exposure to mobility. We could probably do that with virtual events too. Rob, like, I think of all of the regional relocation councils, North Texas relocation professionals. We've had the president, Jane Woolston, on here, from Sabre Corporation. It's like DRRC in my neck of the woods. Like, why aren't we partnering with a university's international business school, right, and offering free, attendance to these kids? Like, that's just like no brainer, low hanging fruit. What are your thoughts on that, Lee?
I've always been a proponent of inviting students to these types of events. You can work with the organizers to create content, right? So when we're talking about you need soft skills, well, sometimes the university can't teach everything at once and also graduate them with their core education that they need to learn. So I think that that's where we play in that, a partner and helping these students and bridge the gap. So for instance, I've done presentations not only on global mobility or tax, but I've done presentations on Deloitte had this business chemistry, which is a personality test that they have, and how you work with people and how you communicate with people that are different personalities from you, right? So some of the activities that you do is you take this test to know who you are, what type of personality you are, and then you try to understand how you work with other people. So for instance, just a quick example, if I'm extrovert and I'm an idea generator and I generate all these ideas, I might be working with someone who's a very introvert and more risk adverse type of person, and they're not going to want to take all these risks. So when they see me with all these ideas, they're going to see me as dangerous, right? And they might block and say, no, I don't care anything you have to say, because you keep coming up with all this stuff, and I like the way these things work now, so I'm not open to ideas. But if I understand that how reserved they are, risk adverse, my approach can be a little different, and I can mitigate what their risk factors are so that they can be more open to my idea. So that is, there's a lot of learning opportunities around soft skills that we as corporate partners can bring to those students. I know that I sat through a lot of presentations, in my last 2 years of school that I think helped me a lot.
I love that. And even just the idea of giving these personality assessments, right? I mean, this is something we do all the time in corporate America. And yet we're asking kids to declare a major and go into grad school having never taken an assessment. And it's like, How do I know what I want to do? I
Right.
remember my freshman orientation, they gave me a list of jobs. Like, what sounds appealing? I was like, pass. I was like, where's the keg party on here? I don't see. I heard this is a little different. I don't understand. So I think that's awesome. I think there's so much we can do. There's so much we can do. Letitia says, I'm just being introduced to this industry. I think it's so interesting. Letitia's the
Oh, I've met her. Yes, I know who she
she
is.
works in the classroom. I forget your title, Letitia. I don't want to mess it up. I want to say graduate assistant, but I'm not sure. I think it's so interesting how it connects global strategy with accounting, logistics, cross-cultural communication, so much more. I can definitely see how it could be a theme for a specialized career fair. Yeah, it's like an interesting. I mean, that's one thing about global mobility. Like, it'll make you pull your hair out because there's so much going on. But at the same time, like, you could like have a very interesting career. Oh, by the way, with lots of international assignments, with lots of exposure to really cool, curious, smart people. Sandra says, really great session. I love the way that Lee is merging the concept with the application. Janet says, I know plenty of global moving companies who have taken on interns for industry friends, kids around the globe for over the years. Teaching assistant to Professor Zedorek. Is what Letitia says. Thank you for that. Jamie says, great discussion, Ben and Lee. I really learned a lot today. I want to ask you one kind of final question in closing, Lee, and that is, give us one piece of advice. Everybody that's watching this, most people that's watching this right now are industry folks, right? Global mobility professionals. How can we get involved? Honestly, you've inspired me hearing your story, hearing about the mentorship. I know firsthand mentorship, goes both ways, and it's an enriching experience for both parties. How can we get involved?
So I would say start locally, right? And support the initiatives that are going on locally. So reach out to local schools, see what kind of programs they have going, and support them. Support them. Bringing pizza one night with a presentation on personal, on public speaking, for instance, or communication, and just having a conversation with students, getting to know students, supporting them. If they're starting a student organization, try to support them. A lot of times, dollars are always being stretched everywhere, and everyone's looking, organizations are always looking for money. So from a corporate standpoint, you're limited as to who you can help. But sometimes, I know I've done it even out of my pocket, right? Because how much is you bring in some Little Caesars pizza, it's not going to set you back a lot, right?
Yeah.
But to these students, pizza draws students, right? So you come in with a few boxes of pizza, good presentation on something, you're going to help support. So I think, starting at a local level, and once we start growing in this area and student organizations become stronger, and maybe one day we have a national student organization and we can have this awesome annual conference when bringing a bunch of students and professionals all in one room, which could be done in I would say in a few years. But start small now and start supporting those local initiatives that you have going on.
This
Would
is
be my advice.
fantastic. I love it. I'm like thinking already, how do we get a global mobility club together? How do we take some of the scholarship dollars that we have at the local, regional, and national association level and funnel it into the support here and feedback the industry? I'm thinking of so many things, and I can't wait till I can go back in the classroom and bring some pizza and give a talk, a mediocre talk on global mobility to a bunch of kids. I can't wait to do this. Thank you, everybody that's been tuning in. Thank you for the amazing commentary. Thank you for getting involved. That's what it's about. I mean, it's 10 times better when you leave one comment. So thank you so much for everybody that did that and got involved. You made this better. Lee, thank you for mentoring these kids. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your time. This has been a lot of fun, man. I really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed our conversation, and thank you everyone for tuning in and your comments and asking questions to keep the conversation going. Thank you so much.
Next time I'm in Plano, I'm gonna look you up, man. We're gonna do
Absolutely.
something, man, for
Absolutely.
sure. Cool, everybody. Take care. We will see you tomorrow. Ellie Sullivan from Weikert's going to be on Thursday. Laura Gattens from Altair Global is going to be on Friday. Nidal Lafi and Greg Zalesny, students from UTD. We're going to do the whole week. We're talking about mobility in the academe. We're jamming out here. It's the JAM, Joint Academic Mobility Week. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.